Hi guys, it's April, and can you believe that the month is over again? I can't. I don't know where it went. I don't know where any months have gone. By the way, do any of the rest of you feel like stopping your reading because you don't want to add yet another book to your wrap-up? Or is that just me? August is done, and it's time for a wrap-up. I managed to squeeze 14 books into August. I'm still not entirely sure how that happened, but I got 14 in there and you get to listen to all of them. You're welcome. So to start out the month, I was on a road trip with my mother to drop off my grandmother and visit my brother. And so we listened to a couple audiobooks along the way. And the first of that was Size 12 and Ready to Rock by Meg Cabot. This is part of her Size 12 series, which is based around Heather Wells, who is not your typical Size 2 that you see portrayed in the media. She used to be a singer, but after her mother ran away with all of her money and her career just went pew, she became an assistant resident hall director. So she got to deal with college kids, and oddly enough, her life somehow always ends up involving murder of some kind and her piecing together the facts and figuring out what's going on. So she becomes this little detective and gets into these situations that are just unfair, I guess. I really love the concept of the whole series. Maybe if I had started at the beginning, I would have developed with Heather a lot more instead of jumping into what seemed like the middle. Because I just kind of got thrown into the middle of it, I wasn't that enthralled by the characters. I found some of them a little too juvenile for my taste. And even Heather herself had quirks that I couldn't let go of. And so in the end, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The second audiobook that I listened to with my beautiful mother was Deadline by Sandra Brown. This is mystery romance. It's centered around Dawson Scott, who is a journalist. He's suddenly thrown into investigating this story by a friend of his. And of course, he ultimately sees and falls in love with the widow of the story he's investigating. Things just kind of snowball from there. It was entertaining, but I kind of disliked the sort of insta-lust that happened and the ultimate creep factor of Scott, as he pretty much stalks this woman and then ends up justifying it, and in the end she's okay with. I'm not sure how I feel about all of that. In the end, it was a 3 out of 5 stars. And if you guys watched my book haul that I uploaded a couple days ago, you saw Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel and how I read it to my mother during the trip. We ran out of audiobook. We needed another 7 hours of entertainment. I read this book to her. We got about halfway through and I need to turn around and give this to my mother. It is about a world where a very strong strain of the flu just wipes out most of the population in a very short period of time. It goes from post-flu epidemic to pre-flu and in between, and it just jumps around the storyline following a couple main characters, and you get to see how their lives intertwine, both pre and post, and how they affect each other without even realizing it. And it is a beautiful story. I absolutely loved it. I had some issues with some of the writing where it got really list-like and just didn't end the sentence. Overall, I enjoyed it and gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I also picked up a little short story by Philip Pullman called Once Upon a Time in the North, and this takes place in his Dark Materials universe. It is a story about how Lee and Barrison became friends and acquaintances. If you don't remember who those characters are, it is the wonderful Texan with his little rabbit Damon and the talking polar bear. I just loved getting back into that universe and getting more out of it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. And then I got trapped by the Precious Stone trilogy by Kirsten Gear. This, of course, includes ruby red, sapphire blue, and emerald green. This is a time travel YA fantasy. It is centered around this girl, Gwyneth Shepherd, whose family has this gene that allows them to time travel. And she's grown up knowing this, always thinking that she wasn't one of those few carriers that had the gene. And so she never was brought up on the training. It was always her cousin. And then one day, she starts time traveling. And so she has to, learn everything really rapidly. She gets indoctrinated into this secret society and learns all about what she can do and why she's doing it. And along the way, she starts to realize that there are some things that just aren't right. This kicks off the whole story, jumping through time, trying to figure out who to trust, who not to trust, and the frustration. I can't tell you how many times I just said words, especially in the first two books. Those first two books, I think that's what really captured me so much, is I wanted to know what happened, because I'm like, but how can you? The last book wasn't my favorite. It did wrap up most of the major storylines, but I was still left with a couple questions that I don't know if are ever going to be answered. I ended up giving the series 4, 4, and 3 respectively, totaling it all out to about a 3.7. It is something that I would recommend if you're looking for a good time travel YA fantasy thing to read. This month, Morgan at Little Word Weaver and Rebecca over at Y Mermaid hosted a read-along for Emma, which I think is just great. Just a couple months ago, I finally read a Jane Austen novel for myself, and I've been wanting to get into more of them. So when they announced that they were having this Emma read-along, I'm like, heck yes. I will link the read-along group down below, so if you still want to do it and talk about it, go for it. I will link the Twitter conversations as well. I actually enjoyed Emma. I think in the end I like Mr. Knightley more than Darcy, but I like Elizabeth better than Emma. Emma is just... she had a lot of growing up she needed to do in the novel, and she did start to get there, and I completely appreciate that. And this was a fun little quirky little matchmaking novel by Jane Austen. And so I got a 4 out of 5 stars from me. I've talked about this one several times now, and it actually has released today because I'm filming this on the 31st, even though this is uploading on the 1st. Just deal with it, guys. Time travel happens in YouTube videos. And that is Solarversia by Toby Downton. I'm excited that this is now officially out and there are physical copies that can be had. That is glorious. The whole premise of Solarversia is that there is this year-long game that anyone can participate in, and there's all kinds of like little quests and survival and puzzles, and it deals with a lot of interesting AI issues and technology things that could happen. I can't go into all of my thoughts here, so I will link my review above, but I highly recommend that if you liked things like, I guess, The Hunger Games or Ready Player One is kind of been compared to a mashup of that. There's a little bit of Alice in Wonderland in there as well. If you kind of like the gaming kind of stories, and I'm not talking about just the first-person shooter kind of games, I say pick it up. I finally got my hands on a copy of Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. This is something that has been going around YouTube like crazy, so me, like everybody else, had to see what all of this was about. Red Queen, of course, is based on there being 2 different classes of people, the reds and the whites, and they're separated by blood because apparently blood color lets people know whether or not you have powers. Usually if you have silver blood, you have some kind of like epic power that controls some kind of element or energy or whatever, and the reds are treated like servants and indentured servants and all kinds of things. So there's this like weird class structure. It did have a very interesting premise. However, I found nothing new in it, so I wasn't that excited. Be interesting to see where things go, if there can be more of a surprise element in it, but overall I wasn't that impressed. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. yeah. So I saw that Mirror Mask was a book. Mirror Mask is by Neil Gaiman. It was originally a movie that was written by him, and it is a beautiful, beautiful movie. So if you haven't ever seen Mirror Mask, you should pick it up because the artistry in that movie is just beautiful. So I'm like, oh, I like Mirror Mask movie. I've got to like this book. I did. It was the same as the movie. It wasn't anything spectacular. I didn't get anything new out of it. In fact, I felt like something was lost because you didn't have the imagery that you had from the movie. So in the end, I only gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. So I finally got to read Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. And I can't tell you how glad that I am. I, of course, read To Kill a Mockingbird in school. At the time, I wasn't too thrilled with it. It was required reading. I'm like, I had to drudge through it. And looking back now, I can pick up some things on it that I'm like, oh, I'm glad I read that, and I'm glad that's in my thinking process. So when it was announced that Go Set a Watchman was out, I'm like, heck yeah. I actually like Go Set a Watchman more than I like To Kill a Mockingbird. I know that is like anti-intuitive to a lot of people who have been reading Go Set a Watchman because of what happens with certain characters. They've built up things in their brain, and when you mess with that universe, it shatters everything, and they don't like that. But that's what this book is all about, and I think that's what I really love. That's what I grasp onto. It's growing up and letting your preconceived notions and your ideologies in your hero worship actually dissolve and becoming your own person and forming your own opinions. And I just connected with that so well. So I ended up giving that a 4 out of 5 stars, and it's gonna show up on my shelf at some point, guys. It really is. And then you guys know that I'm doing a read-along of Harry Potter with my roommate. We have hit the 2nd month in the read-along, so we have read the 2nd book, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I don't really feel like I need to do a wrap-up because this is pretty much in most people's brains as a thing. Yep. And I know I told you at the beginning of that sometimes I feel like I have to hold up reading because these videos get ridiculously long at the end of the month when I'm trying to wrap everything up. But I couldn't help myself, and I read through all of The Lean Startup by Eric Ries today. I just got tired of marketing at work beating me over the head with the Lean Startup and the MVP concept and pa-cha, pa-cha, pa-cha. I'm like, no, I'm done with that. I am done. I am reading this book. I am getting the concepts out of it, and I am going to actually form my own opinions and see what you're saying is really in this book or not. And yes, what they were saying was in the book, but they were taking only parts of this book and fixating on them and forgetting about the rest of the support structure for something like a lean startup. I kind of went on a tangent there. Sorry, guys. Okay, so the lean startup is, of course, about starting a business or a concept or a product and doing a very rapid iterative cycle that involves the customer very heavily and just getting the minimal viable product, the parts of it that you think are most important out first, and just keep on building on that. And this is probably getting really boring for most of you, so I'm just gonna leave it on that. I have so many feelings now that I've read this. My e-copy is like highlighted all to get out. I'm probably gonna once again need a physical copy that I can go through and highlight and put sticky notes in and keep on my desk, so when these marketers come to my desk saying these things to me, I can first beat them over the head with the book, and then I can open it to the page saying, yeah, you're saying this, but you have to remember the rest of this. That was my tangent for the end of this video. You can now go on to your happy viewing and no longer listening to me. I don't know what else to say. If there's something that you read that is similar to what I read, I would love to hear your opinions, even if they're completely against what I said. I would love to start a conversation with you, so do that. And I don't know, I'm thinking about doing a video over the Lean Startup, but I don't know how many people would actually be interested in that. So if you are, let me know. Otherwise, I just might write an extremely long review on Goodreads. Heart your beautiful faces. Bye. Fia, really? 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 By the precious... Say that 5 times fast. I can't say P's or F's right now. What is that? Golly jeez. All the chitter. We are now using chitter instead of Twitter.